So it seems that there's this cultural consensus that Raiders of the Lost Ark was pretty much the best film ever made. But what about the movie Sneakers, starring Robert Redford? Now that movie really has everything. But if we're going to throw around these type of accolades, it's all the more important to assess the art historical accuracy of this film, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, of course, there's a reason why I bring this up. You just happen to have been signed a paper where you have to watch a popular historical film. And while watching this film, you are asked to select one and only one aspect of the film in which you will use two works of art to support your claim regarding whether or not this film is representing ancient culture accurately. So it was only recently I saw for the first time Raiders of the Lost Ark, which, as a professor and an archaeologist myself, I found this film to be pretty good, entertaining. But when it got to the scene that you see here, I started to get an uncomfortable pit in my stomach. Actually, this is one of many pits I had in my stomach throughout this movie. And when we feel uncomfortable, what do? We research. So the plot is that Indiana Jones is trying to find the lost Ark of the Covenant. And in the process, he's led to an archaeological site that's controlled by the Nazis. This site has this underground structure that they're calling a map room, although I don't recall seeing any maps in this structure. And because he is an adventurer archaeologist, Indiana Jones is dramatically lowered down into this map room by a rope. And down in this room, he finds a model of the city of Tanis. Okay, so far so good. Tanis was an actual city in ancient Egypt. Here it is, right up here, as we can see, located in the northeastern delta of Lower Egypt. It actually was the capital of Egypt during the Third Intermediate Period, which was more specifically the 21st and the 22nd dynasties. Now, in the film, they talk about the pharaoh who sees the Ark of Covenant in ye olden times, and they refer to him as Shishak. Now, we're still okay in terms of historical accuracy because there was an actual pharaoh, but that name was a biblical name. And what Egyptologists say is likely that pharaoh was known by the Egyptians as Shoshenq I. And Shoshenq I did rule Egypt during the 22nd dynasty, and that was affiliated with Tanis. I don't know about you, but I am at this point breathing a sigh of relief. So far, this movie seems accurate, and this pit in my stomach was maybe just a symptom of an oversensitive art historian. Okay, so I've started to set up my argument with a little bit of contextual support. Now it's time to bring in some artwork. Here we're looking at a portal wall that depicts the man himself, Shoshenq I. Now, from an iconographical standpoint, we should be seeing some things that are familiar, things that we have seen before in this class. Let's take a little trip down memory lane and revisit the Palette of Narmer, the first pharaoh of the first dynasty during the early dynastic period of Egypt. We have that similar iconography. The short war kilt, seen here and seen here. The active masculine stance with the left foot forward. An audaciously, ridiculously large headdress. Although Narmer, as we know, is wearing the bowling pin situation of Upper Egypt, the headjet crown. And Shoshenq I is wearing the double-plumed crown, which is also known as the Amun crown. Now here is how I'm going to use this work of art to assess my argument, which so far is that in respect to there being a pharaoh affiliated with the city of Tanis, the Raiders of the Lost Ark is pretty on point. But here's a problem. According to the film, Shoshenq I seized the Ark of the Covenant from the Temple of Solomon when he raided Jerusalem. Now, this was something that was also described in the Bible. However, scholars do not consider the Bible a historical source. And this is rightfully so. The utmost caution needs to be taken because there are quite a few biblical narratives that are contradicted by irrefutable archaeological evidence. And in the case here, it's epigraphic evidence that is refuting biblical narrative. On this wall that depicts Shoshenq I, there are hieroglyphic inscriptions that provide a quite detailed account of this pharaoh's foreign exploits. Among this list, Jerusalem is not included. So this indicates that Shoshenq I did not seize Jerusalem, and therefore he did not sack the Temple of Solomon. And here now we have a point of inaccuracy in Raiders of the Lost Ark. But this is not the true inaccuracy that I want to address. The cause for the pit in my stomach was from the minute I saw this architectural model of the city of Tanis. And I knew that this could not be an architectural reality. The red arrows, which we see here, are pointed at these structures which are called pylons. And I've put the spelling for you up here. A pylon was a structure that was relatively unique to Egyptian architecture. The word pylon is Greek for gateway, and its traditional function is protection. Although I would argue that an additional function would be to create an imposing and awe-inspiring entry point to a significant space. Similar to the previous slide with the wall that includes the image of Shoshenq I, and that actually was a pylon wall, these walls would be typically covered with relief sculpture or inscriptions. Usually it would be imagery that would be reinforcing the power of the king, which we saw evidenced in all of that pharaonic iconography. So if I want to be picky, I can also say that these model pylon walls are inaccurate because they shouldn't be unadorned. If you look at them, they look like they're plain. They should have all of these carvings and inscriptions. There should be pharaonic imagery located on them. Now, the other point of inaccuracy, in addition to the idea that these are plain, are the fact that they're located on the side. If these were pylon walls that were accurate, they should be facing to the front to actually act as gateways and not these kind of like weird side walls that we can see. Let me show you an example. If you look at this structure from another angle, again, you can see that they're located at the side and they're not located at the entry point. So these don't really function as protection. They don't really function to, mark the entryway. Now, again, we need to base all of this on evidence. I'm sitting here and I'm telling you that this is inaccurate, to have the pylons placed along the side rather than along the front. Is there any way that I could further prove this argument? Let's take a look at the Temple of Amun at Karnak. This is a reconstruction, obviously. What we have here is you can see the pylon walls, and you can see that they're located at the front. Now, this is not just any random temple that I'm using to prove my point. While the Temple of Amun was initially constructed in the New Kingdom period, which predates the Third Intermediate Period, which is the time of Shoshenq I, he did go back and add on to this temple. So he certainly would have been aware of the pylon placement, and he would not have constructed a temple at Tanis that would have pylon walls along the side of the structure. In fact, what he added to the Temple of Amun was a pylon wall. So he definitely understood the traditions of this architectural form. And let me just bring in one more point of evidence to support my argument that the model city of Tanis depicted in the map room is inaccurate, particularly as it refers to pylon architecture. This is a model of the Temple of Amun that was a real structure that was actually located in the city of Tanis. It was a smaller scale version of the Temple of Amun at Karnak that we just looked at. This temple had two entrances, and you know how you can tell where the entrances are? You can tell by looking at the pylon walls here as well as here. These are what are marking the entrances, and they're located at the front, not along the side. So my conclusion is that while there actually was a Tanis, a city, and actually a Shoshenq I, who is referred to as Shishak in the movie, that this is where the historical realities end. There is no archaeological or epigraphic evidence to indicate that this pharaoh ever raided Jerusalem, and by extension, the Temple of Solomon, to claim the Ark of the Covenant. And the more egregious offense is that the film does not portray Egyptian temple architecture accurately by placing the pylon walls on the side rather than at the front of the structure where they would be more effectively located and would function as a portal to mark the entryway and to additionally provide protection. But wait, there's one more thing. Don't forget that one of the requirements of this paper is to do research. You are required to consult a minimum of 3 text-based sources outside of your textbook. I did some research when I put together this presentation, and these are the sources that I consulted. You're permitted to use websites as long as they are academic, and as long as this is in addition to the minimum of 3 text-based sources. One more quick note. The format that you see here is Chicago, also known as Turabian, which is the official citation format for the discipline of art history. However, you're welcome to use the MLA format if you are more comfortable with that format. But the takeaway here, regardless of what format you're using, that it needs to be accurate. What I have here for you is accurate. Every period, every comma, all of those things are accurate, except, oops, not careful enough editing, need to edit a ton of times. This obviously should be italicized, but otherwise, my bibliography would be accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and deduct a point from my own grade here because I did not edit my own work. And it's with this that I wish you good luck on writing your paper.